Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today's video, what we're going to talk about is the Carolina Panthers 2021 fantasy football season preview. I'm going through all the NFL teams this offseason in preparation for the fantasy football season. I'm going through their quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight ends, defense, and kickers for every single team. So if you're interested in stuff like that, please like, comment, subscribe to my channel, and I will get you ready to succeed for fantasy football so you can win your league next season. So once again, if you're interested in stuff like this, please check out my channel. Also, if you can guess the name of the song that I started out with, then you will get a question answered and a shout out on this channel in these fantasy football videos, and you can ask whatever fantasy football question you want and I'll answer it. Also, if you ask a fantasy football question, chances are I will answer it and probably mention you on the channel as well. So please continue to take advantage of that while I'm still a small channel that doesn't have a lot of subscribers so far. But yeah, if you're interested, I also talk about a lot of stuff on my channel. I do song reactions. I do song covers. I just posted a song cover earlier this morning. So please check it out if you're interested in a wide variety of stuff. And yeah, hopefully you enjoy it. So let's go to the Carolina Panthers. And we're going to start with their schedule like we've been doing for every team. And if you remember in the last video, I talked about the Buffalo Bills and their schedule, how it was very weak to start the season, a very difficult schedule, but they have a very strong schedule to end the season. It's actually the opposite for the Carolina Panthers. They have a very light start to the season, but a very difficult end to the season. So you look at their first couple weeks, they got the New York Jets at home. That to me seems like it's going to be a great offensive game for the Panthers, not only because the Jets are a bad defense, but you got the whole Sam Darnold revenge against his old team thing going there. And then they play New Orleans the next week. That's a tough defense. But then they've got three very favorable matchups that all run the Civ defense in the Houston Texans, the Dallas Cowboys, and the Philadelphia Eagles. So these are all very exploitable matchups that the Panthers should be able to take advantage of, especially with some of the offensive firepower that they have that I'm going to be talking about. But then things get more difficult later on. You look late in the season. Well, first of all, the big thing they have going against them is they have a bye week, week 13. So they're one of the later byes when you're starting to prepare for the playoffs. Then they, in week 15, when you're theoretically getting to the fantasy football playoffs, you're going to the Buffalo Bills. That's going to be a cold weather game, likely a very difficult matchup for them. Then they host the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which projects to be a great defense, and then they go to New Orleans, which is a good defense in New Orleans. So that's a very difficult playoff schedule for fantasy football. So these are assets that you want to sell high. So there's a lot of receivers that I'm going to talk about that are kind of not necessarily stand out, but could have some big games. You might want to consider trying to flip some of those to see if you can get better receivers later on. So this is a good example of a hypothetical I kind of put together in the last video for the Bills. If you've got some of these receivers that have started out really well to the 2021 season, and say Stephon Diggs has started poorly because they have a tough schedule to start the season, the Buffalo Bills do, then maybe you could flip for him if you use some of these Panthers. So keep that in mind. That's why it's very important to look at these schedules for all these teams, and that's why I'm doing that in these videos. So let's go to the quarterback position. And notably, the Carolina Panthers, they have Sam Darnold now. So they if you're not aware, they traded for Sam Darnold from the New York Jets. The Jets were when it became apparent that they're going to be drafting a quarterback this season, they decided to go with Zach Wilson and traded Sam Darnold to the Panthers. Teddy Bridgewater, the former quarterback, is now on the Denver Broncos. So what do I make of Sam Darnold on the Panthers? And to be honest, I could see it going either way. I could see him having a good season and having a breakout year with a better lineup, especially a team that it likes to try to get guys out in the open for some quick passes and utilize their speed. Hopefully that could work to Sam Darnold's advantage with some explosive plays to help his numbers. But you look at how Sam Darnold performed just in a vacuum last season, and it really was not too impressive. So I know he missed some games, but across 12 games last year, he had 59.6 completion percentage, which isn't necessarily great compared to a lot of quarterbacks in the league. 2,208 passing yards. He had 9 touchdowns, but he also had 11 interceptions. And I'm going to be honest, like, even though he's not got a line, he didn't really have much of a line support and receivers to throw to in New York. 11 interceptions is still relatively concerning for a young quarterback like that. And especially a guy who's been around a little longer than just his rookie year. And you go back to the season before that, when he had his most productive season with the Jets in 2019, there were some things that you like there where he had 3,000 passing yards, 19 touchdowns, but he had 13 interceptions that season. So he's had double-digit interceptions every year that he's been in the league. It's concerning to me, and I think with Sam Darnold, especially in a system that he's going to have to be learning this offseason, and it was an odd fit to me because I thought that what Matt Rule was going to be doing was trying to get running quarterbacks that can spread out the field and give you multiple options, kind of like in a college system like he ran at Baylor. So that's why I thought that was the whole point of why he brought in P.J. Walker, because they had a similar system or similar style of play as Teddy Bridgewater. But Sam Darnold does not really seem to be that guy. He's not necessarily a high-profile running quarterback. So I think he could be a good streamer from week to week, especially since they're starting off the season very strong. But I don't really like him as a draft pick. But he's got some good weapons around him, so he could be a decent flyer option for you. Personally, I wouldn't be necessarily trying to take him early in drafts or anything like that. I think somewhere right around the weekly stream waiver wire fringe starter option is probably where I see him being this year. So now we go to the running back position, and the Panthers, in my opinion, have the best PPR player that in all of fantasy football. So if you have the number 1 pick in the draft and you're in a PPR league, I think there's no questions asked. You take Christian McCaffrey, and Christian McCaffrey. A lot has been made of him, especially the way he played in 2019. He was just insanely productive. If you just look at the numbers from 2019, this guy, so he had 456 total PPR points. The next highest running back was Aaron Jones, who had 304. So Christian McCaffrey is literally giving you 50% more points than the next best running back. That's like 150 points compared to Aaron Jones' nearly 300. That is just insanely productive. He was a cheat code in 2019, and he had 1,000 receiving yards, 1,000 rushing yards. He had touchdowns receiving, touchdowns running. And, even last year, he only played 3 games because he was dealing with a multitude of injuries. So I think a lot of people are concerned going into this season about that. But even when the games that he did play, he had 6 touchdowns across 3 games and about 250 yards, I believe. So even though he 287 yards, 225. I'm sorry, I was looking at different numbers. But even that being said, if he's producing 2 touchdowns a game in the 3 games that he's played, that's great value. So this is, to me, one of the best options that you can have in fantasy football. I think that this is going to continue because Matt Rule, from what I saw when the Panthers played last year, he loves to pass it to the running backs, pass it to speed guys, even use them as a wildcat option to just have a direct snap to them and get them out in the open, let them run and make plays. He's going to do that with Christian McCaffrey. I really like him going into this fantasy football season. Of note, so I haven't really talked about handcuffs much, but this is a situation where there's a very important handcuff that I want to talk about. So the Carolina Panthers drafted Chuba Hubbard. I think that's how you pronounce his first name. But he is a running back that that they took in the 4th round from Oklahoma State. What he projects to be is kind of more of that downhill back. He's not necessarily the speed guy, but he could be a very good option for them as a goal line back, potentially, to give you some points here and there. But his real value is as a handcuff. And what I mean by handcuff, if you're not really familiar with that, is basically a player that you're holding on your bench in the event that something happens to Christian McCaffrey where he gets hurt, because this guy will give you number 1 production. And this guy is going to be one of the best handcuffs if he actually lives up to his potential in training camp and preseason and holds the number 2 running back position. Because if anything happens to Christian McCaffrey, all those touches are going to go to Chuba Hubbard. And you even saw this with Mike Davis last year, the previous running back. When Christian McCaffrey was hurt, they did not go to a committee. They just gave everything to Mike Davis. That's why he was very productive for the Panthers last year. And this guy, you gotta make. This is why, in my opinion, you draft your kicker and your defense in the last and second to last round. Because in the 3rd and 4th to last round, you want to try to find guys like these, like Chuba Hubbard, that you can stash as a handcuff. And I'm just telling you right now, if he's available and I'm going down in the draft board through the last few rounds and I see him coming up on the draft board, he is one of the guys that I am prioritizing to take, even if I do not own Christian McCaffrey, because you're holding him and you're trying to, and it becomes a valuable asset, not only to you in case Christian McCaffrey gets hurt, but to the owner of Christian McCaffrey. So it works in so many different ways to have an excellent handcuff. Alexander Madison is another one for Dalvin Cook, for example. That was kind of the guy that everybody kind of wanted last year. So do not underestimate these guys like this when you're looking at the backup running backs, because they can have a lot of value to you, especially in situations like this when you're coming off a guy who was injured last year. So long discussion there on running backs. We'll get to the wide receivers now. So wide receiver 1 for the Carolina Panthers is DJ Moore. And I like DJ Moore for this season. I think he had some productive games for them last year. Maybe not necessarily as great as he's been with Cam Newton before. But DJ Moore is a guy that is going to be the number 1 receiver on this team. He also did not have, when he had Teddy Bridgewater last year, Teddy Bridgewater is not necessarily known for bombing the ball down the field. So yeah, I think DJ Moore is going to have a lot of opportunity with Sam Darnold to make an impact, and I like his prospects going into this coming season. So the other one that I really like for the Carolina Panthers potentially as a guy that you can put in, by the way, DJ Moore, I'm looking at maybe like a 5th, 6th round guy, could be solid value there. But another receiver that I really like for the Carolina Panthers is Robbie Anderson. Robbie Anderson, great downfield threat. He is the definition of inconsistency. So he's not necessarily a guy that I would draft, but given the fact that the Panthers have a very light early schedule, and given the fact that Sam Darnold has a rapport with Robbie Anderson from their time with the Jets, I would strongly consider taking Robbie Anderson as a flyer and then maybe seeing if you could use him as trade bait to get a more consistent player as the season goes on. Because when you got a matchup against the Jets in the first week, you're going to have a lot of numbers. And then when you got following defenses like the Texans and the Cowboys, then he could have a great start to the season. They also got David Moore, who had spent some time with Seattle and Arizona. I'm not the biggest fan of him, but he's a veteran that is worth keeping an eye on. But again, you talk veterans that are already reached their peak and potential. There's a guy with a lot of potential on the Panthers receiving corps. His name is Terrance Marshall, 2nd round pick out of LSU. And this is a good opportunity for him because the Panthers have good receivers, but they don't have standout guys necessarily. Maybe you could argue DJ Moore could be that. But Terrance Marshall was a guy who was slept on in drafts. He wasn't necessarily the Jamar Chase or Jalen Waddle or Devontae Smith that everybody wanted, but he's looks to be a very good receiver. People had high draft grades for him. Could really take advantage of a Carolina offense that needs a good receiver and a good reliable option. I like him as a guy that you could take a flyer on. There's a lot of good receivers that have potential in this offense. It's just the question is who's going to step up. So, and then another one that you can even consider as well is Shee Smith. He is a 6th-round receiver from University of South Carolina. He projects to be kind of that slot guy. And remember, the Panthers really like using their slot receivers like Curtis Samuel last year in multiple ways. Maybe he could kind of fill that role. He's probably not going to get drafted, or he's going to be at the very end of the draft at best. Could be a good flyer option to keep an eye on. Tight ends for the Carolina Panthers. So they signed Dan Arnold from the Cardinals. I already talked about that a little bit in my Cardinals video. You can go back and watch that if you want to. But Dan Arnold is now going to be the starting tight end for the Panthers. And I'm not the biggest fan of taking him, to be honest. And the simple reason being is not because of the fact that Dan Arnold did show improvement last year, which is worth considering, but the Panthers did not use their tight end a lot last year. They're more of a slot receiver, dump off to the running back kind of team more so than using the tight end, which is different than the way that Ron Rivera ran this team in the past. So Dan Arnold is going to have his opportunities just simply because of the fact that he's a starter, but I'm personally not a big fan of him because even when he had his opportunity in Arizona, he still only had 91 fantasy points in PPR. And so he was kind of a stream option then. He's probably going to be a stream option now, but again, with that soft schedule to start the season, he is worth taking a look at early in the season for stream options. Especially given their backup tight end. So another void potential filler. Tommy Tremble is a 3rd-round pick that they drafted for their tight end core. He's played for Notre Dame last year. So the draft reports on him is that he's a great blocker and he's very athletic, but not necessarily the best pass catcher. So to me, that does not show the signs of somebody who's ready to step up and fill the void in this offense. But he doesn't necessarily have a lot of competition. But still, I think especially with the Carolina Panthers, Tremble is a guy to keep an eye on as the season goes along to see if he eventually overtakes Dan Arnold as the starter. I personally don't see him having much of an impact early on, but I don't think this is a guy that's going to be looked at to get drafted anyway, though. So I think you're probably fine just letting him be on waivers. But maybe he's worth keeping an eye on, though, just because 3rd-round draft pick, he's the guy that they have some faith in to be their eventual starting tight end. We now move to the defense. And the defense was not great last year, but they do have some guys to suggest they'll improve. Jeremy Chin last year was a very good safety for them. He just moved to linebacker, and then they just drafted Jaycee Horn from South Carolina to be their starting cornerback. So they've got some young guys to improve. I would not be surprised if they make a jump a little bit this season, but they're a team that you'd not want to be drafting. You want to monitor waivers and then kind of see how they're doing. But they are a good option for week 1. I'm just saying that maybe it's a last round or second to last round defense to draft. It could be a good stream option for you going up against a rookie quarterback, Zach Wilson. And then their kicker. So their kicker is Joey Slye. Joey Slye, to me, so he's got a big leg. He's attempted kicks from 60-plus yards and all that, but he's honestly not particularly been very accurate. He was 29 of 36 last year, so not necessarily the best of numbers. But then surprisingly is for all these 50-plus yard, 60-plus yard field goals that he's kicking, he's only actually made one kick last year over 50 yards. So to me, I just don't understand the value in somebody like that. I would rather take a guy that's going to be more consistent, is going to attempt a lot of field goals, probably because they don't have a great running back core, which does not apply to the Panthers at all. Christian McCaffrey, but a guy that is going to be accurate too is also highly important. So Joey Slye, I'm not particularly interested in. I'm just going to be honest with you on that. So that's all I got for Carolina. The next video I'm going to do is the Chicago Bears. So I'll continue to knock out these teams as the summer goes along and get you ready for the fantasy football season. So let me know if you got any comments, questions, or concerns or anything like that. And like and subscribe to my channel too. So, all right, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.